Good morning and welcome to Community Roundtable, a free public service brought to you on AM 1590 KDJS. If you're a member of a nonprofit organization and would like to be featured on the program, call the KDJS Newsline at 320-235-2900. That's 320-235-2900.
Welcome to Community Roundtable once again, your Sunday morning feature, right around 7:30 every Sunday morning. Al Sheldon there. Pleasure to have you all tuned in, AM 1590 and FM 105.7. And with me once again, totally different topic this time, is good friend and local Candioi County resident Barb Levine. How you doing, Barb?
I'm doing very well, Al.
Thanks for coming back. You've been gone for a while. We'll get into that, but people may recall you were here talking about that book on a little Candioi County history from a short couple, 3-4 months ago, whatever it's been, right?
Yep.
And how's that been coming along for you? Anything good?
I put an index in the book, and the Candioi County Historical Society has some copies of the book with 22 pages of index covering all the subjects that Gabriel Steeney covered and every name that he mentions in the book. So 22 pages is a pretty big index, I think.
That's a lot of good index. That's a chapter or two,
yeah,
depending upon the book. But we're going to cover a totally different topic today. Let's go back maybe farther than we even think we should go back because it means we're getting older. But quite a few years back, you spent a lot of time in the Philippine Islands as a resident. And what were you doing?
I went over to the Philippines for the first time in 1985 as a short-term missionary.
Short-term,
thinking that do this little 6-month thing and God will be happy with me, and then I can go home and do whatever I want.
And how'd that turn out for you?
It didn't turn out. It didn't turn out the way I planned it at all. I kind of feel like God tricked me, which he's not capable of doing, but I ended up staying for 15 years.
15 years. Now, you get there, you've never been there before, totally new language, or languages, I should say, more than one, because Philippines encompass, 1,000 islands maybe? Or
how about 7,000 islands?
That's a lot of islands. A lot of places to become Gilligan.
Yes, and just about every village has a different dialect. And so there are 100 languages in the country, and I live way up in the mountains in a place called Bontoc, which is part of the mountain province. And I learned how to speak the Bontoc language, and that was very helpful because that was the language in that area. But every single village I went to had a different dialect.
Did it take a long time to catch on?
I was dumber than a box of rocks on learning the language, so it took me a long time. I had friends from other countries that came and learned the language much quicker than I did. But my advantage was I stayed longer than they did. So.
How did you decide to go to the Philippines in the first place? Who led the way for you? Who helped you get there?
I was sent by the Covenant Church as a missionary, and it was the organization called Youth with a Mission, or sometimes known as YWAM, and they were the ones that said, this is where we're going. And at the time that we went, I had no idea where the Philippines was. I knew nothing about the history of the country and nothing about the culture that I was going to be going to. It was an adventure, and so I was game to go.
How many people went?
In my first team of going, there were about 30 of us, and we were divided into 3 different locations within the country.
And you initially were going to be there for a couple of weeks?
We were going to be there for about 3 months.
3 months, all right.
And in 3 months, we were supposed to conduct some vacation Bible school and visit different villages and just see what God had in store for us in those places.
How did you come about to stay after the 3 months?
The leaders of my team asked me if I'd be interested in doing a 2-year stint of just the outreaches. And I said, yeah, I can do that. So then I was thinking, okay, 2 more years. I can afford 2 years out of my life. Mm-hmm. And in those 2 years, I went to the Philippines 5 times. I went to Japan once and to Fiji twice. And then on the last trip of those, in that 2 years, I was in I was in the Philippines, I was in Bontoc, and I was sick with typhoid for an entire month. So I was a terrible leader for my group at that time.
Now, what happened when you got the typhoid? Local medicine pretty prevalent and relevant to typhoid, I'm guessing. Did you go to Manila then, or?
Oh no, I was up in the mountain province, and the hospital wanted to keep me confined and give me blood and some, I think it was dextrose, and I said, oh, I don't think I want to be in the hospital. So I stayed at the Youth with a Mission house, and I was under bed rest for an entire month, and I can't remember if I was taking antibiotics or not.
This was your first year there?
Yes.
Now, how the heck do you pay for a hospital bill when you're in a country you really don't know anything about yet?
Oh, the hospital bill was nothing.
Compared to what we have here.
Well, it was a government hospital, and I did not stay in the hospital, so I probably paid out of pocket for some medicines, and that was very minimal.
And speaking of out of pocket, did the youth group pay for your trip, the airfare, your transportation? Do you have to bring your own money? When you say out of pocket, do you earn money while you're there at all? Or?
No, we didn't earn any money. But my church here at New London, the Covenant Church, was supporting me, and that was all the money that I needed.
Wow, that's just an amazing start to an amazing journey. And again, you're there back and forth for a while. Now, when did you make an extended stay out of it then?
Well, I stayed from 87 until 2000, but I would come back to Minnesota about every 2 years.
That's pretty extended, 1987 to the year 2000.
Yeah.
That's pretty extended. Oh, man. Every 2 years you come back. Did our area change? Did you change? Did people tell you about yourself?
Oh, I changed completely. One of the hardest things for me was to come back. I'd been living basically in a kind of a camping situation. The villages that I was working in had no electricity, no running water, no toilets, no TV or radio, and I got used to that. And then when I would come back here, I remember one particular time my sister took me to the new Target in Wilmer that had just opened up. And I remember walking in the store and looking around and thinking to myself, who needs all this stuff? Mm-hmm. And I told my sister, I have to get out of here. This is making no sense to me. And so I went out and sat in the car. I couldn't comprehend all that stuff.
That's a lot of, overwhelming would be the word.
It was overwhelming.
Yeah. Gosh, now when people here think of the Philippines, I'm sure they're asking you questions like I'm asking you questions. You fly into Manila. We're familiar with Manila. It's the capital. It's a big area, big city. And it's not just a little drive down the road to the village you're talking about. You mentioned 7,000 islands. Where you went, was this on the same island as Manila, or did you boat to another island and then somewhere, or how'd that work?
Well, the island of Luzon is where Manila is. Mm-hmm. And the mountains that I was working in are on that same island. So then I would arrive in Manila and then travel for most of a day to get to a place called Baguio City, which is the summer capital. It's about a mile high. It's like the Denver of Asia.
So it's a bigger island.
Oh, it's an island the size of California.
Okay. Crazy.
Yeah.
Some people would like to make California an island. Now they know what it would be like. So and the roads aren't I-35.
Well, from Manila to most of the way to Baguio, it's a 4-lane highway now.
It is a 4-lane, okay.
It was only a 2-lane road when I was there.
Okay.
But now it's a 4-lane highway, and you can drive 60 miles an hour on that. But then the last hour getting to Baguio, it's a mountain road, and it's plagued with landslides. And anytime there's an earthquake or a heavy rain, those roads that go up into the mountain area can be jeopardized very quickly, and things change and get more difficult. But then from Baguio to Bontoc, where I lived, that's only 100 miles, but it takes, well, back in the day, it took 8 hours to get there, and today I think you can do it in about 5 hours.
Oh, they've speeded things up a little bit for you.
Well, they concreted most of the road.
Yeah, okay.
So that makes a huge difference. And I was over there this most recent trip with 5 ladies from the Open Door Church, which is where I'm attending now. Mm-hmm. And one of the ladies said, "Oh my gosh, this is like a carnival ride that never ends."
That's amazing, and we're going to get to that segment soon. Here, I'm looking at my clock here. Time is already going way too fast. But you mentioned the word earthquake, so I want to bring that up because if anyone is familiar with earthquakes in the Pacific Ocean, it's called the Ring of Fire, and it can start down around, say, New Zealand and kind of arc its way through the Philippines and Japan, angled to the right over toward the Aleutian Islands and Alaska, down the coast of Canada, California, and western Mexico. It's like a horseshoe, the Ring of Fire. And you experienced a large earthquake during your stay, right?
There was a 7.2 earthquake when I was over there in 1990, and it was a horrible experience.
Tell me about what you do when the earthquake hits. Did you realize it was an earthquake right away?
No, I was taking a nap. I had just been on a bus for the 8 hours going from Bontoc back to Baguio. In fact, I was on my way to catch an airplane to come back for my sister's wedding. And so I'd gotten into Baguio City at about, I suppose, around 2 o'clock. And my friends there said, "Why don't you take a nap and then we'll go have some coffee and go to a movie?" Mm-hmm. And so in the midst of my deep sleep taking a nap, the bed was jolted away from the wall that I was sleeping on.
Wow.
And I looked out the window and saw some of my friends crouched down on the lawn, and they were saying, "Barb, get out of the house. It's an earthquake." And I couldn't move because the house was shaking so badly that there was no way I could stand or get out of there.
How do you eventually get out then?
The earth quit shaking for a little bit, and I grabbed the wall and I ran down the stairs and then out the door.
And then what?
As we were standing outside, somebody said, "Oh, this isn't a safe place to stand because if the earth shakes again, the whole house could come down and we could get crushed by parts of the house." Mm-hmm. So then we went out to the parking area, and somebody said, "Oh, this isn't a safe place because there was a huge pine tree, and if that came down, we would get killed by that."
So then
we went out to the street, and we're standing on the sidewalk, and somebody looked up and saw a tangle of telephone and electrical wires, and they said, "Oh, this isn't a safe place." So we walked down the street a little farther, and then somebody came along and said, "This isn't a safe place because underneath this part of the road is a big canal, and if the road opens up, you could get swept away in the canal."
So Plan G?
Plan G was to go over to the nearby park and stand in the open there, and some of the group did that, but another friend and I walked around the city. We went to the one of the universities there because she was concerned. She had a niece and nephew who were students at the university, and we had heard that the fourth floor of one of the buildings at the university had collapsed onto the second floor, crushing the third floor, and she wanted to go make sure that her niece and nephew were safe.
And you saw a lot of heroes throughout the course of the earthquake.
My heroes of that situation were, there was a team from Canada that was visiting, and these great big Canadian good-looking guys like football players.
Paul Bunyan's.
And those guys spent the entire night of the earthquake going from vehicle to vehicle, siphoning gasoline out of the vehicles so that they could put gasoline into some generators at the hospital, so that doctors doing operations and emergency stuff, which was all outside. Nobody dared be in any buildings. And these guys were stealing gas to fuel these generators to keep lights and instruments going all night long.
Wow. We're talking with Barb Levine. A lot of you may know Barb as Barb Mossberg. Barb was a missionary for about 15 years over in the Philippines, if you just tuned in. And we're just scratching the surface of an interesting story of being a missionary and learning the lifestyle of being in the Philippine Islands and how crazy it is. And we may have to have part 2 on this in a couple of weeks here, because I don't think we're going to have all the time in the world to cover our bases, Barb. But yeah, the earthquake's done that you experienced. It was 7.2, you said?
7.2.
You catch the airplane?
I missed my airplane.
You were coming back to the States for your sister's wedding. What'd you do?
Well, I contacted the U.S. Embassy, and they had a tent set up in Camp John Hay, which was in Baguio City, and all the roads were blocked. There was nobody coming into Baguio, and there was nobody getting out on the roads. People were hiking to get out, and the U.S. Embassy said that they had a helicopter service where they would ferry American citizens out of Baguio, and so I said, I'll take that. And I showed up the next day for the helicopter. They flew me down to Clark Air Force Base, put me up in a nice hotel there, and I was so exhausted from the ordeal that I overslept the next morning and missed the bus that would take me to Manila. And so I missed my flight back home. And the airport was kind enough to reschedule and not charge me anything. And so a couple of days late, I made it back to Minnesota just in time for my sister's wedding. And my parents were very happy because they knew that I would be in Baguio. They knew about the earthquake, and they could not get a hold of me. So they were quite concerned for about 3 days.
Well, my next question, family and the news and where you're at. I mean, this is pre-cell phone as we know it today.
Yeah.
There were some portable phones here and there, but nothing like today's technologies. So yeah, communications. I would imagine the old payphone on the corner just wasn't happening for you with an earthquake going on, right? No,
there was no phone service.
Wow, amazing, amazing tale to get through and to live through. Gosh, you gonna write a book about this experience someday?
Perhaps. We'll see.
That would be very interesting. So you're in the Philippines. You get through the earthquake. You get home. Did you want to fly back pretty quick then and get back to missionary work? Or?
I did, and I only stayed about 6 weeks that time. And when I got back to the Philippines, the earth was still having aftershocks.
Wow.
About every 3 or 4 days, there'd be a big jolt, and you never knew if it was going to be another big one or not.
Yeah.
And it felt like something underneath the ground was like a big jackhammer pounding upward. It was a very tense time, and then we also walked around Baguio and saw all the damage. I've got a photo album of buildings that were tipping over and cars that were crushed, and there were something like I think I remember something like 1,300 people that perished in that earthquake right in that area.
So you're also there for the reconstruction then?
Actually, I went back up to Bontoc where there was very little damage, and then the next time I was back in Baguio, most of it was all cleaned up, and it took a couple of years for the reconstruction, but I didn't see very much of that.
Bontoc is high enough in the mountains where it's not going to be as affected by an earthquake as sea level.
Oh,
right? Is that right? Or?
No, it's just as affected. But that particular earthquake was 100 miles farther away. So,
okay.
So that was what saved. We'd had earthquakes in Bontoc also, but they just kind of shook the house and didn't do the major damage that happened in Baguio.
And again, if you just tuned in, Bontoc is a village way south of Manila on the same island of Luzon. It's north or south?
It's north.
North, okay. And it's where you landed doing missionary work. You had to learn some language. We touched on that early in our conversation. Can you give us a good morning in the Bontoc language?
Gawisay we eat mo.
How about I'm hungry?
Nauwatak.
How many words, phrases? I mean, did you learn the entire language, or are there still things you could learn?
Oh, there's still a lot more I could learn. If they talk fast or use shortcuts or some idioms, I can easily get lost in understanding what they're saying.
It'd kind of be like our language of the personal communication devices now, all the acronyms and what a letter or two might mean. to someone who's probably 30 years younger than us, and we haven't learned it yet. You know,
Right.
Same deal. Wow, that is just an amazing, amazing thing that you got into there. Were the people open to Christian missionary folks like yourself and wanting to learn?
Yes, they were. They were. I got invited to many different places where I didn't have the time to go. There was one time I was doing a Bible study in a little village, and there was a stranger there. Turns out he was a leader from one of the distant villages, and he had heard that we were having this Bible study, and so he came to listen in to see what it was like. And then at the end of the Bible study, he introduced himself to me and said, "I am from," and he motioned with his hand 3 times, which meant he was 3 mountains over in a village over there. And he said, "Can you come to my place and do the same thing, do a Bible study there so that the people there can also understand about God?" And I said, "You can't say no to someone over in the Philippines." I had to say, "Yes, Father, I would love to come and visit your village and do a Bible study there. But my problem is I don't have any freedom. I was going, at that time I was going to, I think, about 5 different villages, and one every day of the week, and I didn't have another day, and it would have taken a day to hike to his village." So
my next question, okay, he's 3 mountains over. How far is that, and is there a road?
There was not a road to his village, and that would have probably been the equivalent of anywhere from 3 to 5 hour hike.
Wow. No wonder you're in shape.
Yeah, not anymore.
Yes, now the villages, describe a village. How big are they? Do we look at a village as like Kirkoven, size-wise? What kind of houses? What's a village like?
A village would be like average anywhere from 100 to 250 houses.
And the houses are not white clapboard or vinyl siding, I'm guessing, are they?
They are sheet metal, and a sheet metal roof, and probably sheet metal sides made out of wood, about the size of a 1-car garage. And there'd be probably about 7 people living in that. And it could have a dirt floor on the lower level, and a wood floor on the second floor.
And cooking is done mostly outside?
Cooking is done when I was living over there. Cooking was mostly done with a wood fire, and there'd be a corner of the downstairs part of the house, or there'd be a lean-to outside where you'd do the cooking, and there'd be a pot of rice and a pot of maybe some vegetables that they gathered out by the rice fields. And the thing that was so attractive to me about these villages is they were all nestled in among the rice terraces. The village of Malikong was probably my favorite. I thought it was the most beautiful because it was like an amphitheater of three different amphitheaters of rice terraces from the top of the mountain down to the bottom, and then this village kind of right in the middle of all that, and it was stunningly beautiful.
I believe you've showed me pictures of something similar to that. Yeah, I can envision a little bit of what that would be like. Gosh. Now, 7 people in a single stall garage house. That's tight quarters.
It actually wasn't that tight, because usually it was just mom and dad and the youngest child that lived at the house.
Okay.
The older boys would go to a place called the Ator, which was a men's meeting place, and every male visitor to the village and every male in the village was allowed to sleep in the Ator, and it was like a men's. There was a big bamboo slat bed in there, and they always kept a fire outside and a little fire inside, and then there'd be a few blankets laying around, and the men would all sleep there, and the women had what they called an ulog, and the women, all the older girls would sleep in the ulog together. And then in the later years, the ulog kind of disappeared, but the girls would use any empty house that somebody's auntie or uncle was not living in, and all the girls of the village could live there together.
Totally amazing. Gosh. Now, you're in the South Pacific. technically South Pacific, right? Or very close to
South Pacific.
South
Yep.
Pacific. But you're in the mountains. Now, you're talking about fires, obviously fire for cooking, but a little fire inside. You're talking about blankets. How cool do these mountains get at night?
Oh, in January, February, it can get almost to the freezing point.
Really?
Yeah, there's some places where there'll be a little skin of ice on a water bucket at night, but
Any snow?
they've never had snow.
I know the Hawaiian peaks have had snow.
Yeah,
But this is further south.
this is a little bit further south.
And southwest, obviously.
Yeah,
Amazing. I would not envision that. I would generally see myself in sandals and shorts and a T-shirt, which I'm sure was common during the day.
yeah.
Wow.
Well, when I first went over there, the older men all wore G-strings, and so it was not uncommon to walk down the streets of Bontoc or even walk around in a village and see an old man wearing a G-string and maybe a suit coat, and then the tails of the G-string hanging out, and barefoot, wearing his bolo knife and carrying a spear.
Spear for hunting?
Spear for more like a walking stick.
Okay.
And it would also have been for battles and for hunting and for protection.
There, again, are so many things that we're going to talk about here that we have to chat in again in about 2 weeks. As we talk, here we are on Sunday morning. It is what is today, the 10th, and on the 24th, we're going to have part 2 because we can't cover everything that I even want to touch base on. Another half hour, we'll get close, But I'm thinking of the food. You mentioned rice. You mentioned vegetables. My next thought was meat, protein.
Well, we had very little meat. It was always chicken or pork.
Mm-hmm.
I had a taste of some beef over there, but it was. You might as well have been chewing some bubble gum because it was a very old cow.
It wasn't what we're used to here.
Oh, not a tender steak at all.
Not our grass-fed, grain-fed beef that our beef producers do such a great job at. We might give them a little plug here because they do, Oh, man. So I've got questions about how open the locals were and what they wanted to learn about Christianity. We've got to bring that up. I want to talk about other religions and maybe medicine man or a spirit man or witchcraft, whatever you'd like to call it, I guess. Saw a news story the other day about kneecaps. We're going to have to mention that news story. Talk about a little bit about the museum that you and your husband have and your room of the museum, specifically with the Philippines, and some unique items you brought back, things you probably couldn't carry on a plane anymore, right?
I think so.
We have to cover that. And then we get to the fact that you got back here, you're living here, and back you go for a month or 6 weeks. Or how long was it you were just back?
I was over there for 5 weeks.
With a group of troopers, I want to say, that came with you. You mentioned attending Open Door Christian Church. You brought a group of 5 ladies with you. And we want to talk about that trip a little bit and fast forwarding to 2018, 2019, and what the heck it's like compared to when you were there for 15 years. So all of these things, Barb, that'll be part 2. Does that sound good?
Sounds good to me.
That sounds good. We're talking with Barb Levine. You, again, may know Barb as Barb Mossberg, and born and raised in Minnesota, and you moved here a long time ago, and everybody knows the name Mossberg, I think, around here, or most people do, and most of them are happy to be an honorary Mossberg sister like my wife is. So, yeah. It's a pleasure to have you here in a couple of weeks. We continue. Sound good?
Sounds good to me.
It's Community Roundtable. We have a blast here on Sunday mornings. Every morning, Sunday, 7:30 till about 8 o'clock. And we'll be visiting. We've got a special show next week with Stephanie Felt from the Wilmer Police Department. Going to talk a little bit about distracted driving. things you shouldn't do and things that get seen. Stephanie is a Candioi County Traffic Education and Safety Team Coordinator. And then after that, 2 weeks from today, Barb will be back, and we get to visit again about just an amazing life.